What's up, folks? Just jumping back in here for the second half of our, well, we'll see if it's half or not. Second half of our breakdown of some kind of key and sort of weird and interesting Scum and Villainy ships and builds and upgrades that I don't think are really getting playtime. Just to go ahead and break them down and spitball some ideas to see what sticks or what doesn't. So I went ahead and talked a lot about the Jumpmaster. I talked a lot about a bit about the Fire Spray, the Y-Wing, and a couple other chassis as well. We just got to Lebo in no particular order, so we're going to keep on going down. Just a super quick recap, all of this I'm talking about in terms of standard play. So Atomic Mass Games 2.5 edition, um, as of November 2023. Just talking about some kind of builds in the current points on the lead up to Worlds that may or may not be helpful. Some of this is meme worthy, some of it is actually competitive. It's a little bit difficult to know which is which, but these are a lot of things that have been dismissed, and I wanted to make sure to throw them out there in case someone just hadn't even heard about them. So without further ado, I'm going to go ahead and share my screen and let's get back to getting weird. Okay, so we're going to jump in straight to the top right with Dirge in the Rogue class Starfighter. Dirge is initiative 5. Just to look at that kind of breakdown, you've got 2 attack dice, 2 green dice, 2 evade dice. You've got 5 hull and 2 shields on a 4-point ship. Now that's a pretty good stat line. And one of the key points that I made yesterday, kind of echoing the Planning Phase Syndicate podcast from a couple weeks back, is that Scum doesn't have that backbone ship. They don't have an X-Wing equivalent, which is that stat line with 3 attack dice. And that's very typical of Scum, that they have these very powerful abilities that are situationally extremely powerful and then either have a really bad downside or just compensate for some other weakness on the chassis. So this ship has a 2 basic attack dice, but then every single one of them comes with 2 cannon slots to go ahead and compensate for that. But they only have a really minimal loadout. So if you slap 6 points on here for the synced cannons to give it a full front arc 3-die gun, you only have 4 points left to play with, which isn't the worst thing in the world, but it's a ship that's very upgrade hungry, and not having that as not having the points to play with is a real bummer. They don't even have all that many points to play with, even base, let alone without that synced cannon. And let's go ahead and highlight this a little bit. So the reason I say they're kind of action hungry, right, is they have boost, but it's red. They have barrel roll, but it's red. So all of their reposition maneuvers, they can't double reposition, and all of them do lead to stress. The dial's okay. The 2 Talon is nice. The 5K is nice. That's a really big 5K. They've got turns 1 through 3, even if the hard 3 is red. They've got blue banks for both the 1 and 2, and then the 2, 3, and 4 straight are blue as well. So it's got a decent dial to be a quick little starfighter-y thing, and a cool action. Like the actions options are really good. So evade to barrel roll is terrific. Focus to boost is fantastic. Focus to barrel roll. These are all really great things, especially on an i5 chassis. So Dirge in particular comes up as good, even if he has some of the lower loadout. But it always, if you compare this out of faction to other 4-point ships, you get a mile of X-Wings that all of your loadout goes to amplifying its strengths, not compensating for its weaknesses. They have a white boost. They have, I believe they have a barrel roll. I could be wrong about that. I think they do with the config, whatever it is. But then they have those flat 3 attack dice. Yeah, so it's kind of a weird one. But then again, we get to the situational abilities where this has a chassis ability called Dead to Rights, which is the same on all Scum rogue fighters, is while you perform an attack, if the defender is in your bullseye, defense dice cannot be modified using green tokens, which is awesome. But you have to line up those bullseyes. And Dirge is okay at it with his repossessions. Not great, but he's okay at it. But all of the others are I4 or below, or initiative 4 or below. So you're really relying on those bullseye shots, and you're rarely going to get them when you need them. Flip side to that, one of the things that I really wanted to highlight with the Rogue class fighter is the power of the proton cannons. Now, it's a 4-die attack. It's only range 2 to 3, and it's only in bullseye, which is a real bummer. And it takes 2 of your 2 recurring charges, so you can only shoot it every other turn. But aside from that, it's a proton cannon that doesn't require a target. It's a proton torpedo that doesn't require a target lock. It is a really powerful gun, really good to have. It's somewhat easy to avoid, but a way to get around that is if you run rogues in packs of 3 to 4. 3 rogues will run you 12 points, and that's a really flexible chassis. If you have 3 of them with your proton cannons, it's a lot easier to line up those shots and get some meaningful stuff out of it because ships can't avoid that many of them. Also, the meta we have right now is really leaning on things like Arc 170s that do not want a couple proton cannons pointing at them. Um, so if you're bringing these, I do encourage you to try the proton cannons just to try them out, see how they work. A lot of people don't touch them just because they are bullseye and just in case you can't land those shots. Um, if you want something a little bit more consistent, you can run the synced cannons and just roll with that. But the proton cannons, I think, are underrated, especially for 4 points. It still has 2 attack dice. It's not nothing. It's not the worst thing in the world. It's not great. But you throw Fearless on there, and it gives you a pretty stellar front arc attack, very reliable up close, even if it's only 3 dice. That's not bad. And then I like when you have the points to throw that engine upgrade on there, so you can give them that white boost, so that you can boost without taking a stress. You can still do the linked boost, the focus to boost to get the stress, but it's not just boost to stress, which is bad. And then Dirge's ability, just to go ahead and say it, is while you defend after the neutralized result step, if there are more hit or crit results than your active shield, you may change 1 hit result to a crit and cancel 1 hit result. So it's completely useless if someone hits you with multiple crits. But if it is that exact result, just 1 hit, 1 crit, and your shields are down, instead you take a single crit. No, that doesn't even work. So you actually have to be 1 crit and 2 hits, so that you would then take 2 crits and cancel that 1 hit. So it's iffy. It's not great. It doesn't compare to Separatist Dirge. So I tend to think of the ability as blank, but it's it's there. Strong vote on Dirge for Enduring, which of course that really cuts down your upgrade points. But Enduring says, while you defend, if you're not in the attacker's bullseye, critical results are neutralized before hit results. And then after you suffer a critical damage, you may perform a calculate or focus action on your action bar, whichever you have, even while stressed, treating the action as red. So that's not great, but it's an opportunity where if you have a shot back after taking that defense, not only do you dramatically increase the chances that your ability is going to trigger by canceling out crits instead of hits, but also you do get the opportunity for a bonus action as well. So it's a weird piece. I really want to like the rogues, and I think they are good in packs if you run multiple rogues, because that amplifies their durability and gives them more opportunity to line up those proton cannons. And if you're lining up multiple proton cannons against bigger targets, that is going to melt them real fast. Proton cannons do a phenomenal amount of damage, even if there is a challenge lining them up and then difficulty getting them off. So that it is funny. The rogue class with proton cannons is a perfect single snapshot of kind of where Scum is in general and where the ships end up being, where there's this funny sort of balancing act where they are very powerful sometimes. And it's usually not often enough to make it worth it because they are costed as if they were consistent, and they're not. And I opened the last recording talking about that ceiling versus floor, right? Where the ceiling is kind of the upper average of what your ship will accomplish, like how many points it will bring in for when you run it, with the floor being the kind of lowest average points that it's going to bring in when you run it. And something that's inconsistent has a much wider range between floor and ceiling, and that's not what you want if you're running in competitive events where you want to perform consistently in all of your games. Still, I think there's something to rogues. They have performed fairly well, and they have almost, counting shields as like a little bit more than 1-to-1 with hull, they've got double the durability of a Fang at the same price point at 4. So that's, that's pretty good. And all of them are 4, so you don't have any 5 or 6 cost one. So that's certainly something to look at. Yeah, I don't have Cad Bane in here, the pilot, but he has a crew slot. And then his ability also, which you've probably seen it, is if you perform an attack that hits, you may spend 2 charges to transfer 1 red or orange token that you have to the defender. Also has a bomb slot and the option to cloak. So definitely take a look at Cad. He's got all of Dirge's weaknesses. And then he's also initiative 4, I believe, but maybe 3. And then doesn't have that defensive strength, but his ability is better. The obvious combo there is the crew Zuckuss. We'll go ahead and look at real quick here, who's been really jacked up in points. Zuckuss probably because of Cad. While you perform an attack, if you are not stressed, you may choose 1 defense die and gain 1 stress token. If you do, the defender must reroll that die. Now, Cad, again, his ability is if the attack hits. So what you can do here is you take the shot, you're not stressed, and then after you take the shot, you use Zuckuss's ability to gain a stress, reroll one of their defense dice to make it more likely you hit them, and then you take a stress with the intent to pass it to the defender. Another opportunity you can do is Forlom, which is Kind of dumb, but you can do it. I love Forlom Crew. I loved it a lot more before it was 8 points. But Forlom reads, while you perform an attack after rolling attack dice, you may name a type of green token. If you do, gain 2 ion tokens, and during this attack, the defender cannot spend tokens of the named type. So if you're shooting with CAD, you've got your synced cannons. I don't think that fits with Forlom, but you've got your shot. You're gonna land it. They have a focus token and a bunch of green dice. You can say, I'm gonna go ahead and ion myself so you can't spend those green tokens. And then if you are lucky, you will land the hit and you will be able to pass them an ion token. It's one of those rare occasions where you can do max damage and then also ionize your opponent, which is tempting, but it's iffy. And that's another thing. It's all that thing where it's just like consistency is a problem for Scum. And that may actually be the biggest problem, is that they really struggle with things that are consistent. They have some really powerful pieces, but it's all got like a big asterisk next to it. Either it doesn't always work, it's hard to pull off, or there is a downside that's potentially game losing, like the pain bot we talked about with Dengar, where it gives you 3, I think 4 charges to go ahead and re-roll any attack die. But if you roll into a crit, you take a crit. Just like, come on. But anyway, I still love Scum, and there's a lot of really good stuff here. So I'm going to keep going. So I'm looking at Hondo Onaka, the fire spray pilot. Now, I talked about Hondo Crew, who I think is absolutely phenomenal. This also is a really interesting ship and pilot for a somewhat different space. Now, another thing I've talked about too is how strong the 6-point slot is for Scum. So it's really very difficult to justify spending 7 points for a ship. And Hondo in particular, he is a fire spray, but he's an initiative 1 fire spray that wants to be coordinating instead of actually taking actions that are good for the fire spray. So shooting last, moving first, has a really good ability that we'll talk about in a second, but still could comfortably be 6 points and sort of compete with the other stuff and be taken more often, just because that initiative 1 is a huge downside on this thing. But to read the ability, action, choose 2 non-huge ships at range 0 to 3 of you that are not friendly to each other. Each chosen ship may perform an action that is on your action bar, even while stressed, in the order of your choice. Then gain 1 calculate token. So he's able to do this as the pilot and then still get some benefit in that calculate token. So let's break that down. So Hondo Crew, we're talking about Hondo Crew first, is you pick 2 ships that are friendly to each other. So say Han and Sabine. You jam Han and you coordinate Sabine. Yay! Or you pick 2 of your own ships, or you take Fen and you coordinate Fen and you jam Dace, who's got like 4 focus tokens sitting on him, whatever. So there's always that balance where you have to coordinate an enemy to jam an enemy, but you get to jam an enemy at range 3, which is great. Or you get to coordinate a friendly at range 3 at the cost of jamming one of your own ships, which is, there's always someone you want to jam. A couple key differences about Pilot. Pilot is ships that are not friendly to each other. So if you want to coordinate one of your ships, you have to also coordinate an enemy ship. It also doesn't have any opportunity to jam. Now that you get the order of your choice is good, but when you coordinate the ship, that ship's controller chooses the action. So you don't get to say, okay, I will take a target lock and you will take a red boost. Have fun. You can't do that, unfortunately. That would probably be a little bit too powerful. But as it is, the ability is really, really good. And there are 2 key things I would mention on that. Number 1, it lets you do that action even while stressed, which is it's great. That's a way to give your ships actions even if they are stressed, which is really good, with the caveat that you can't coordinate an opposing stressed ship and have it not act, which you can do with Crew. The other key piece is that it's an action on Hondo's action bar, not any on the target ship. So look at that action bar. You can give a ship that doesn't have boost. You can give a ship that doesn't have reinforce. So you got to be careful who you're coordinating on the opposing team. But this is a really fun way to give like Fen Rao reinforce. We'll go to town. Or you could give Lebo or one of the YVs boost, which is really good. So yeah, there's some really powerful combos there. The problem is that you end up spending 7 points on Hondo to support another expensive ship. So it takes up a giant chunk of your list, which is why I was talking about the points in the first place. But it is a really, really powerful ability. It happens in initiative 1, so he's likely to do it before anything else has happened. So you could actually take your big expensive piece, boost it into a spot that's really good for blocking before your opponent list is moved, and then that ship will still get to act in its own initiative later. So there's a lot of opportunity to play around with stuff there. And he does have 18 loadout with a fire spray, who also happens to have a big bunch of slots, including a double cannon slot. So you can drop a proton cannon on him just in case. Giant joy. So this is my sort of standard Hondo build. You've got that Marauder, so he's got the reroll for a rear attack. I've got Han Gunner on there, and then I've got Lando on there. Now, the reason for that is that when you do your coordinate, you get a calculate token. Lando can treat that as a reroll for any 2 dice on any offense or defense roll you have at all. And then when you engage, so when you shoot last with your initiative 1, Han Solo gives the opportunity to then take a focus action. So you do your coordinate, you get a free calculate, and then you get a focus from Han, and it stresses you, but you end up with a double modded shot with a soft. So the calculate is a reroll of 2 dice, and then Han is a focus. So you get rerolls and focus. So you get a double modded shot, assuming you haven't spent that token on defense at some point. Now, an alternative thing you can do is instead of Lando, you can swap in the Mandalorian, who gives you the white reinforce, so that when you use Hondo's coordinate, the target ship can do a white reinforce instead of a red. Now, that's less important because you lose that Lando reroll thing, but it does give Hondo the opportunity to take a defensive action without being stressed himself, and can be kind of nice. Now, one of the reasons that that's really good is that then Hondo himself, when in turns where he doesn't coordinate, he can do a white reinforce, and then you can still do the Han action, but you can always take the red reinforce anyway, so it's kind of half a dozen one way. Was it 6 one way, half a dozen the other? There we go. So I really like this combo of Lando Han because it's Lando and Han riding around with Hondo, which is a lot of fun to think about by itself. You can throw a baffle on there to deal with stress and really get out of places. You got contraband on there. He's got a bunch of loadout to play with, so you can do a lot, but that is my go-to build for the reasons I just said, where I can abuse him on the coordinate and still get double modded attacks, or on turns where I don't want to do that, I can reinforce and then still have double modded attacks, even if I take the stress for it. So very good. I've got an alternative build over here with the proton cannons, the Mandalorian. So this is one I talked about as well, that you swap out Han. So I just put both on here just so you can go ahead and see them. I do think he's a really strong piece, but he's one you want to take if you're going to use it. And the biggest downside for me on this is that if you take Hondo Pilot, you can't take Hondo Crew. And right now, Jam is really good. So it's hard to find a case where giving another ship boost or reinforce is better than bringing a crew carrier that gives you the option to jam up to range 3. So I end up taking Hondo Crew in most of my lists instead of this guy, but I still wanted to make sure to highlight him because he's a really, really interesting piece, and there's something there. I just have to find it, or we just need a points update so that he fits with other stuff. But yeah, you can always reinforce Dirge, and that becomes a nigh indestructible ship. So the combination of his ability, especially if you slap Enduring on there, and then a reinforce, and good luck bringing that down. All right, so we'll go ahead and jump. Now, I have talked a bunch about how 7 points are difficult to justify, but I did want to go ahead and highlight Crassus. So Crassus Trellix is, and this actually doesn't work. This is, well, it still does. You can perform front arc special attacks from your rear arc, and while you perform a special attack, you may reroll 1 attack die. Now, I'm reading that as kind of blank, so he's an initiative 3 fire spray, because on this build I have proton cannons, which are a bullseye attack, so they are not a full forward arc attack. So Crassus can't fire proton cannons backwards, but I've got trick shot in there, because you can line up a proton cannon shot with trick shot, throw 5 dice. Yeah, throw 5 dice with your proton cannons, and then Crassus's reroll ability still applies to the special attack, whether it's front or back. So you've got a soft reroll. Then you also have 5 dice from your proton cannon. You've got the passive mod on the proton cannon, and then you've got Rook Cast here, who says after you perform a red action, you may gain 1 strain token. While you perform an attack, if you are strained, you may change 1 of your blank or eyeball results to a hit result. And then on top of that, you have Boba Fett Crew. So this is kind of dumb, but if you line up the dream beautiful shot, you're throwing a 5-die proton cannon at something that then, if there are no other ships in the attack arc, if you have that beautiful proton cannon shot against a single target, Boba will automatically turn an eyeball to a hit. Proton cannons will automatically turn an eyeball or a hit to a crit. And Rook will automatically turn a blank or an eyeball to a hit. So you could flip a lot of dice on that. And I've got Slave 1 on here just because. For the same reason, because if you are, no, that's a full front arc. So yeah, it all still works too. Even if you don't use the proton cannons, the combo still works. It's just, you're not as likely to trigger Boba. You don't throw as many dice, but still you have that trick shot and potential to throw a lot of dice. I threw that on there just to say it. I don't think it's particularly good. That's meme worthy. But if you line up that shot, Oh man. Yeah. So anyway, that's good. Um, Not going to spend too much time about Crassus. I had Hondo on here, so I was like, let's put another fire spray. It's still 7 points, and there's so many more consistent options at 6 that I would kind of avoid that. Which, speaking of, we get to the Mandalorian in the ST-70 Assault Craft, also known as the Razor Crest. Now, of course, you're probably familiar with the Razor Crest. One of the great things about it is you slap the free title on there. It gives you the evade to roll action, which is a really good combo because the Razor Crest's blues are all straights. So being able to barrel roll gives you the opportunity to change lanes and move around a little bit while still then setting yourself up to clear your stress in the following turn. Action bar, it gets that from the title. It's got a red barrel roll already, and it's got a white evade. So, yeah, it's a thing. But his ability is really interesting. While you defend or perform an attack, if you're in the front arc at range 1 to 2 of 2 or more enemy ships, you may change one of your blank results to an eyeball result, which is really good if you have a focus token or if you have some force. So he's definitely designed to be flown with the child. And that's really good because there's no limit to that. If you're shot 3 or 4 times, it doesn't even matter if the ships shooting at you are the ones that you are in front arc at range 1 to 2 of. You still get that automatic mod, and then as you take defense, every time you take a hit, you regain force. So he becomes phenomenally durable when you're in the scrum. And I've talked a couple times about how overall ship counts of lists have gone up. So the Mandalorian 6 points with 2 shields and 7 hull with a really good defensive ability and a great combo with the child. Now the child, of course, being 7 points for 2 force points, which is really, really good. At the downside that up to 2 of your opponent's ships, every time they perform an attack against this defender, they automatically get to acquire a target lock for free. Now, chances are they're going to be locked anyway, but that's still not something you want to give away without thinking about it. But his ability is so defensive. He's got the recurring force on here. So as he's sort of chipping away damage, he's also regenerating force that he can use on offense or just dying extremely slowly. You got Fearless on here for those 4-die range 1 attacks. The ability still triggers there. Really consistent close range offense, a lot of defense, a very tanky ship. This is actually a really solid build for a really interesting piece. So, but he is Mandalorian, so you can still play around with this quite a bit and give him the Mandalorian upgrades, Beskar or Mandalorian Optics to automatically get those updates. Or of course, he's particularly good with clan training because he wants to have focus tokens, focus and force. That being cheaper than Fearless, that gives you another 2 points to play with. So you got some stuff to do there. I wanted to make sure to bring up the child because he's also a really good thing on Boba. And the thing about it is Boba is a points fortress, right? So he's 9 points, yes, but he's very hard to bring down. And a lot of players will decide not to shoot at him just because he takes so much to bring down. You slap the child on there. If they decide to go after him, that means that they're target locking Boba. And that means they're basically ignoring your other ships that are flying around that are usually going to be much more fragile. So there's a gamble there where you may end up losing Boba in some clutch games, but it does make Boba much more survivable having his rerolls and that recurring force. And if they're shooting at Boba, they better mean it, and they better keep shooting at him until he goes down, because if they shoot at him some and then don't finish him off, that basically hands you the game. That's a little exaggerated, but still. The 2 ships that I would definitely consider bringing the child on are the Mandalorian and Boba, because their abilities both combo with it so well, and it's such a like 7 points for 2 force is that is good. That is really good if you have the defensive ability and enough hit points to tank the defensive downside. So yeah, Boba with the child, very, very good. So we'll keep going on. I've got another build for the Mandalorian here, and this is kind of a weird one. So it's the same sort of thing where I talked about Boba Fett Gunner, who, while you perform an attack, if there's only one ship in the attack arc, then you get an automatic mod. Got Kira and Optics, which I talked about before. So in the system phase, you can lock a rock, then you can completely ignore that rock when you're moving and shooting. You're not locking your opponent when you're shooting at them, but it still is kind of it's a powerful piece to be able to move this ship around the battlefield because it flies like a brick. But yeah, I do want to make sure to highlight clan training with this guy because you have that action bar, and clan training turns all of those into a sort of technical linked focus. So you could do evade focus, you could do target lock focus. This is one of the ships that can do target lock focus, either with optics or with clan training. Both of them give you the option to double mod your own attacks, making it a very independent, extremely aggressive ship. Very good. Wanted to make sure to highlight that. And now the Mandalorian, these are builds that I've seen elsewhere. I think Martini in the Scum GSP chat is the one that talks this one up a lot. I do like this one too. I believe this one I saw on a tournament list at some point. I did want to go ahead and also shout out the Humble Guild Bounty Hunter, which is the 2-pip generic version of the Mandalorian. Still comes in at the same price point, which is not great, but has the really interesting ability of while you perform an attack at range 1 to 2, you may spend 1 non-recurring charge from one of your equipped illicit upgrades to change 1 eyeball result to a crit. To change an eyeball straight to a crit that's really good. Yeah, so it's certainly worth considering because that's a really good passive mod. And if people see the Mandalorian, they will treat it as something to be afraid of. If they see the Guild Bounty Hunter, they'll probably scoff and be like, whatever, what was this thing? But the downside being the only really good illicit to run on that is Babu Frick, who is unique. So you can't run 2 of these. So if you run 1 Guild Bounty Hunter and try to do that, you get just the 1. Now I like this one because it's got Predator for the soft mod and then Babu Frick for that eyeball to crit. So it's a single die mod, but it is double modded where you get both a reroll and a focus mod. So that's still really good to just have passive mods while you're rolling around the board, and probably being ignored in a lot of ways that some of the other ST70 pilots wouldn't be. Other bonus on that, this also gives the opportunity to bring a 6-point gunner and still have points there. So that could be Dengar, who I talked about before, who does the automatic damage if you're attacked. So that'll discourage people from shooting at this thing, so you can run around and just have your fun. Or you could also do Bosk. Bosk letting you, again, shoot a second time. So you have this modded thing, say you blank out, you take another shot at it. Just like, whatever, I'm not going to use well, you can use your Predator reroll, but you don't need to use your Babu Frick. And then say it doesn't go well, you get to try again. You want to watch that, though, because these things don't shed stress very well. But it's there. Again, it's one of those kind of memesy, gimmicky things, but there's enough power in those combos that they can be really, really good if used carefully, and they can be consistent. And the price point is not bad, where you can pack a lot of other stuff in here with that, making it a little bit better. So let's see, we'll jump to a couple of my favorite 3-pointers. No one is touching the Mining Guild ties. They have the exact same problem that Fang Fighters do, except that they are 3 points, which is nice. Also, they can fly over asteroids without taking any damage from the movement, which is really nice. And they're custom made for Marge Sable Closure, which is after you fully execute a maneuver, if you moved through an obstacle, structure, or huge ship, or if you deployed, you may choose 1 enemy ship in your front arc at range 1 to 2 and give that ship a strain token. To be able to give a ship a strain token just for moving at it is really, really good. It would be better if they were higher initiative, because at initiative 3, both of them respectively, there's a good chance they'll assign that strain before the ship moves, and if that ship does a blue maneuver, it just removes that strain. If it doesn't, though, then you have a strain target, and that's a really good thing for 1 point, and there's not much else you can do with these. So I really like Lapin because he has the cannon slot and can take an ion cannon. He's also 3 points, so he's very cheap. So he's got a lower floor than your Fang Fighters, or even if he goes away in 1 shot, that's nowhere near as bad as losing a Fang Fighter, especially Fen Rao, in a single shot. He still could, but it's 3 points. You don't care as much. And people are also less likely to dedicate shots into him because, again, he is only that 3 points, and it's totally possible that he could completely dodge it. So there will be a fair number of games where people just ignore your Mining Guild ties because they don't want to waste the shots and potentially not kill it. But yeah, Lapin says, while you defend or perform an attack, if the enemy ship is stressed, that ship's dice cannot be modified at all. And it's situational, right? So you have to be targeting a stressed ship. But if a stressed ship shoots at you, so anything does a linked action or takes like stress to do some bonus, then it suddenly can't use any of its mods on Lapin at all, which makes him a whole lot more survivable. And is one of the reasons I really like him. But also having the ion cannon gives him actual meaningful damage output and a lot of disruption potential on the board. Now you see I've got targeting computer on here. That's the more offensive choice. If you get him in a place where you know he's not getting a shot back, or a point where that shot really matters, you can target lock and have that modded shot. Or you can always take that Marge Sable Closure on there as well. And then Ahav, his ability is when you defend or perform an attack, if the enemy ship is larger size than you, roll 1 additional die. So that makes it a 3 attack die ship or a 4 evade ship. So it's a little mini Fen running around for 3 points again. And since there are so many medium and large base ships in the game, it's very likely that's going to trigger a fair number of times and make this an actual meaningful threat. And a couple things I really like about this: false transponder codes, an upgrade I haven't mentioned yet because it got a big points bump but every single ship on this list that has a little extra loadout and an illicit slot is now a potential jam platform, with all of the ST-70s with the Razor Crest title being the best carriers of that because they don't have to pay the points for it. You take the title, you even leave an illicit slot open, and ta-da, you can pop false transponder codes anytime, which is so good. And the reason it's better on that is because false transponder codes read after you acquire a lock on an object or an object acquires a lock on you. If you have an active charge and it has one non-recurring, lose one and jam that object in ignoring range restrictions. So the reason that's better on the ST-70 with the Razor Crest rather is because the Razor Crest keeps it face down. So anytime an opposing ship target locks you, it doesn't trigger that until you want it to. So in your system phase, you say, this has been false transponder codes all along, haha. And also the Mandalorian in particular being initiative 5 is more likely to be able to choose to target lock an opponent and use the jam offensively than the initiative 3 Ahav, who mostly uses it for defense and as an incentive not to be target locked. But still, the combination of false transponder codes on those extra dice is really good. And then I like slapping precision ion engines on here so that you can do your K turns as sloops instead of just straight K turns, which combos really well with Marg Sable Closure. So you can do that through a rock and then point the other direction and land the strain on something that thought it might have been safe. Yeah, so I really like Ahav. I really like the Mining Guild ties. I'd like to see them played more. I don't think I've seen one on the table in a really long time. But they're there. And I have mentioned that you can do a Boba 5-ship list. It's Boba at 9 plus 3 3-pointers for 18, and then Z95 Bosk. So it's pretty squishy, but it's still 5 ships on the board with Boba Fett. So that's a really pretty intimidating list. And if you focus on 3-pointers that are survivable and have cannons, like you got Lappin, you've got Leighton Ashira, and then something else like Sunny Bounder or Ahav, something survivable in that 3-point slot, or you could throw in the Y-Wings. That really can stick around the table for a while and soak a lot of fire and let Boba do a lot of the work that he does. So there's definitely some potential there. And then we've got Rook here at the very bottom, again coming in the 7-point, which is hard to justify. This is a gauntlet, has that 3-die front and then 2-die rear, 2 evade dice again, and then has 9 hull and 2 shields. That's a big, beefy chunk of change. And Rook has the virtue, the special bonus of being a Mandalorian. So she also can equip those Mandalorian optics, and then also take clan training to get that link to focus action, or the long day, let's see, or the Beskar plating to mitigate crits. And on here, so the gauntlet has a red reinforce. I dropped the Mandalorian on here because I had the points to do the white reinforce. The option to take a white reinforce is pretty phenomenal. And one of those things that's really nice to remember that Scum has the option to do for the ships that have reinforce, or don't. If they don't have reinforce but they have a crew slot, it's 2 points to drop it on there and give you the option to take reinforce, which is really good. But the real secret sauce with Rook is her ability, which is before you engage, you may gain 1 strain token. While you perform a primary attack, if you are strained, you may change 1 eyeball result, 1 blank or eyeball to a hit. So you'll just get a hit. If you're strained, no matter what you roll, you will get a hit. Which is really good, especially in combo with Gar Saxon, because he lets you throw more dice. And then also with Mandalorian Optics, which gives you the option to take a target lock and then still reinforce in your turn. So you get the defensive benefits, but then you also get the stuff there. And you also can take that clan training to go ahead and link that to a focus. So when it is your turn to go, you can get a focus and then you can take a strain and then shoot the bejesus out of things. So in the case of Rook, it's actually an advantage for her to be low initiative because she doesn't want to be taking a bunch of damage while strained. So being able to take the strain at initiative 3 is better than taking it at a higher initiative. So really, really good. If you're at all tempted by the gauntlet, definitely give Rook a try. She's one of the pilots they talk about printing hits. Yeah. And now there are several chassis not on here that I haven't necessarily brought up. That isn't to say there isn't more. This is just the things that I haven't seen anyone trying or talking about. So I wanted to make sure to highlight this stuff. And there are a handful of things in here that I talked about that have come up here and there, but not a lot. But now I did want to go ahead and touch on Scum list building. There has been a lot of lists built to 4 ships, which you can do 4 ships. You can do fairly durable 4 ships. The most common combination of points being 6, 6, 6, 2. So you can get 3 of the powerful 6-point ships that we've been talking about, and then the 2-point Bosk. Or the escape craft for whatever reason, if you would ever do that. But so I wanted to take a look at a couple lists. And the first one here, no, not that one. This one. This one I actually named to kind of highlight one of the more fun things about Scum is we've looked at a lot of different ships in various different point slots. So you can have on deck, you're like, these are my favorite 6-pointers, these are my favorite 4-pointers, these are my favorite 3-pointers. And then you can just swap them out individually, like keep them in your bag. And then as you're playing games, you can be like, well, maybe I'll try this combination, or maybe I'll try this combination. So I like sort of marking out my lists in that way. So it's easy to kind of drop in there and change things around. Another common way to go is 6-4-6-4, where you have 2 6s and 2 4-cost ships. It's another 4-ship list, but you get 2 very scary 6-point lists, or 6-point ships. They can really pull a lot of weight. And then one thing about that 6-6-6-2 that comes up a lot is one of the 6s is almost always Fen Rao, who is infinitely more fragile in a smaller list. And if you were to look at that and say, like, okay, I've got Dr. Afra and I've got Lebo, my other 6 is Fen. What if that other 6 was Dengar? He's not as much of a wow factor, but he's a whole lot harder to kill and can shoot twice and can really, really take a punch. And so that's one of those things about it, is if you want a more consistent performer, consider trying a 6-point that is not Fen. And one of the biggest things for me in terms of list building is if you have Fen Rao and you have Z95 Bosk, that's 8 points. It would be a flat upgrade to, instead of that combo, take 2 of the 4-point Fang Fighters. If you really want to take Fang Fighters, even though I've already talked about how they're inconsistent at any point level, it does reduce your ceiling. It reduces Fen's ceiling, but my God, does it rocket Bosk's ceiling. Changing a Z95 to a Fang Fighter is a significant upgrade. And so you are losing Fen, yes, but you're gaining an additional Fang Fighter, and also you are insulating yourself against the ceiling of taking, against the floor of taking Fen Rao and having him one-shot. It's a lot less painful to have your 4-pointer one-shot, especially if you have another one, than it is to have your 6-point one-shot and then be like, well, I guess it's just me and Bosk. But yeah, so I wanted to highlight this because this is a 5-ship list that has a lot of punch to it. You've got Dr. Afra in one of the more standard builds in the YV666. So the way this works is you reinforce, and then you're at initiative 3, and you've got, before you engage, you might spend 1 green token and 1 charge. And she's got 3 charges, non-recurring. If you do, you may choose another ship range 0 to 1 that is not stressed. The chosen ship gains 1 stress token. So it's like, bloop, here you go, you're stressed, which is a really good ability, especially on top of anything that uses, for example, Gar Saxon Gunner. If you have him in the list so that he can go ahead and be like, oh, I'm going to remove that. Or if you've got Migs Mayfield in your squad, that's another opportunity to trigger a bonus shot. Of course, with that, it's when she engages, so that would be something that's initiative 3 or lower, but it's there. And then I've got Rook Cast Crew on here, which has that ability we talked about before, which is after you perform a red action, you may gain 1 strain token. While you perform an attack, if you are strained, you may change one of your blank or eyeball results to a hit. It doesn't say that there for whatever reason. And then you've got Han Solo. So on your turn, you reinforce, get that big defensive bonus. Then when you engage, you have the opportunity to pass a stress. You've already taken the majority of shots you're going to take, so you don't have to worry about keeping that reinforced token. So you can spend that to trigger Afra's ability. And then you do the red focus for Han Solo, and then Rook allows you to trigger. So you get a focus and a strain. So suddenly you have a focus mod and then also a free mod of one of your blanks, which is a really, really powerful attack. Yeah, and that's one of the reasons that Afra comes up a lot. Afra, whatever. Is not only that she can do that combo, but also that she's got 22 loadout. She's the highest loadout of the YV666s, I believe tied with Lats Razi. So you can take Afra and Lats and have both of them just be crit printers, because you can do the same combo we talked about before where you have Lando crew on here. So instead of this Rook Han combo, you can do Lando Han and then use your reinforce for a reroll or some other combos there as well. So there's a lot you can do with that. And then we've also got Dirge. So Dirge, we've got that proton cannon combo. I've got Enduring on here, and you also have the extra slot for marksmanship, which is great. I really like it. Yeah, that's good stuff. And then we have Dace. Now I've talked about many times in here that Scum doesn't have that like standby X-Wing equivalent. We do. We have one. It's Dace Bonearm, the one and only unique pilot that can take the Moldy Crow title, is 4 points, has a 3-die primary gun, 2 evade, and has the 3-2 hull shield. He is basically an X-Wing, who can bank focus tokens, and then also has the not blank ability, where if a ship takes an ion token, you can then spend his charge once every 3 turns to give it 2 additional ion tokens and take a large base that was like, oh, I got 1 ion, and suddenly ionize the thing, which is actually really good if you have other ion things in here. Then we have our Lees that I talked about before, and this is the build that has the seismic charges in Genius, so you can move and then drop a seismic charge to clear out rocks down the field, and that ion cannon turret to combo with Dace's ability, but also it's one of the better guns to bring on our Lees. Now I put that in there, and that specific build is kind of a counter to Han, because if you get rid of those rocks, suddenly that Han can't use that ability to get his free rerolls. Because if you take away the rock, he doesn't get his reroll ability, which makes him significantly less consistent. So there's that. It's also kind of a fun way to take out aces and deal with other stuff too. And then we also have Lima Kai on here with another ion cannon turret just for being the initiative 5. So it's a 5-ship list with a lot of heavy offense and is very, very durable. So this is a very difficult list to deal with. Kind of can joust, has a lot of damage potential, but it's a little bit iffy and scummy and weird. But this is one I really wanted to try, and I really wanted to show off because it is a 5-ship list with a lot of durability and offense, and not something that you see very often played by Scum players. In fact, extremely rarely. Then we have, I wanted to go ahead and show this off too, because Scum also can take a 5-ship list where every single ship in it is initiative 5. And this is a funny combination. I talked about how much I like Cobble with that dorsal turret, talked up Lima Kai. This is one of the more classic builds with Lima that has plasma torpedoes. Personally, I don't like taking target locks with Lima. I've never once gotten that ability to trigger for the automatic lock. So I prefer an ion cannon turret there, but I put that on there because it's the more kind of standard agreed upon Lima Kai build, even though it's not the one I would normally take. We already talked about Dirge, but I swapped marksmanship and enduring for false transponder codes, here giving you the opportunity to jam at initiative 5. And of course, I've got Tapusk with my Hondo on there, and then Old Tarok being the Fang Fighter, who's kind of iffy, but if everything else is 5, he's a lot stronger. One of the most beautiful things about this list is every single ship can choose to activate, so move, and engage and shoot in any order. And that includes Tapusk with Hondo. So you can use Hondo's coordinate before a ship moves or after a ship moves at will. So it is very hard to predict who's going to do what when, and this kind of list gives you total control of the order that you do things in. It's one of those big brain fun lists that can be a good time. I also wanted to go ahead and highlight Old Tarok, because one of the things I really like about him is he has exactly the loadout to do the kind of the ultimate Mandalorian build, right? You've got Beskar, you've got Optics, you've got Fearless, and you've got Clan Training. So he's got all the possible options there. He just feels like the quintessential Fang Fighter. Coming in at 5 points hurts a bit, but if you're going to run one, why not one that strips tokens and doesn't cost 6 points? So I really wanted to highlight this list because it's got a ton of opportunities in there. It doesn't have anywhere near the durability or punch of the last one, but has a lot more flexibility and has a lot more potential to initiative kill things. And the combination of Dirge, Old Tarok, and an I-5 coordinate to help Dirge line up those proton cannons will hit it a lot harder than this may look at first. So I like that one too. But then the one that I personally am looking to practice is my very own 4-ship list. And this is just a very, very scary list. So I've got my 6-point Lebo. I've got that Afra build that we just looked at. Then I've got Manaru with Bosk. I want to try that out because I've got R4B11, who has the opportunity to mod defense dice, and then Bosk as well, and then Predator to hope for some of those passive rerolls. And the combination of punishing one Predator and Bosk means that I'll have at least one reroll on each attack, and potentially even more if something is somehow stacked with red tokens. I can use R4B11 more than once. I want to try that. I like the idea of Bosk better than Gar Saxon because it's not trigger dependent. You can choose when to do it or not. And again, it has that kind of homing missile effect where they can choose to take a hit or two, or they can defend fully and then risk a second shot from Bosk, who I think is very powerful. So I'm curious to try this. I haven't actually tried that, so it may be terrible, but could be good. Especially in combination already with Lebo and Afra, there's so many things that the opponent already has to worry about throwing a lot of damage. The last thing they want to worry about is Manaru also piling damage on there as well. And then again, I've got that Han counter Arlise on here, who could just as easily be the advanced optics ion cannon turret instead of that genius seismic. So I could change that around. But this again is it's not 666, it's 6653, and I could sub out the 3 quite a bit. I could sub out the 6s to basically anything. The 5 is tricky. seeing that that's very, very limited pool. That could be Old Tarok, it could be Manaru, it could be Nom Lum, the Jump Master, but your options are limited. But I think that this specific combination of pilots is really strong, and I'm curious to go ahead and give it a try. And I could swap this out for another Initiative 3 um, 3-point to go ahead and have that same combo I mentioned with that last list, where all of my ships can activate and attack in any order, depending on what's best at any given time. So pretty cool. And there we go. And Afra also is a really good combination with R4B11. The two combo nicely. Yeah. And also the Ion Cannon turret is also a good combination with Manaru. So there's stuff there. Anyway, that's it. I will go ahead and call it. This has been a lot of me chattering. Hopefully there were some surprises in there. Hopefully I kind of expressed my thought process a little bit. And hopefully Scum can start really rocking the table the way we should at some point. So good luck out there. Until next time.